Let's bring in a member of the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thanks for your time this morning. Boy, that footage yesterday that we saw in your committee hearing shot by Alexandra Pelosi, the daughter of Speaker Pelosi, was pretty breathtaking at times. What did you think as you watched it?
Well, the public and the Congress have seen, what was taking place outside with the terrible violence visited upon our officers, and people have an image of Donald Trump just sitting in the White House dining room, not doing anything. But until yesterday, people did not have a sense of how our real political leaders on a bipartisan basis were scrambling to get more police and military reinforcements on the scene, scrambling to get the National Guard there. And I think that it provided a striking and shocking juxtaposition between people who were acting as real leaders, even in a crisis, doing whatever they could together to resolve it, versus Donald Trump just blithely watching the violence unfold from the Oval Office dining room when there were so many things he could have done. He could have crossed the hallway in 20 seconds and gotten on TV and told the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the insurrectionists to go home and call it off. But for several hours, he did nothing.
And Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer doing what the President of the United States should have been doing in that moment, trying to get help to defend all of you at the Capitol. You did subpoena President Trump. You asked for his testimony. You asked for his records. Do you expect to hear from Donald Trump, even if he sits before you and pleads the Fifth? Or do you expect to see those documents? What happens from here?
Well, actually, the committee authorized and directed the chairman to render a subpoena to Donald Trump. So we didn't actually issue it yesterday. The chairman will issue a subpoena that will have a schedule of documents that we're looking for, stated in broad terms, everything related to the attempted political coup and violent insurrection against the Union. We've proceeded in a very methodical and legalistic way. This is a matter of the utmost gravity, of course. I mean, it's hard to imagine a crime more serious for a political leader than attacking his or her own government and trying to topple an election and overthrow the constitutional order. So, we have a team of prosecutors who are lawyers for us, former prosecutors who are lawyers for us. We have a team of staffers, and we have the members, and we intend to get this information from the former president and then also to pursue questions the way we have with more than 1,000 other witnesses. And of course, we have the authority to issue subpoenas, and we would expect that the former president would come the way the vast majority of people have come.
Let's take a step back, a larger view of the last several months, Congressman, and just what you think this Select Committee has accomplished. You certainly told a compelling story using testimony from many of Donald Trump's own witnesses, his aides, people who worked inside the building alongside of him, his own family members. The country sat up and listened because of all of that. If that was indeed the last hearing yesterday, what will this committee have achieved?
Well, what the committee has learned and what we've shared with the public as we've gone along is a story that begins with one man's refusal to accept no for an answer from the American people. And it was Donald Trump's, and it is Donald Trump's, obdurate refusal just to accept the normal workings of democracy that are at the heart of this entire crisis he unleashed on the country. Is there anybody anymore who believes that if Donald Trump had just accepted what more than 60 courts told him, which is that there was no electoral fraud, there was no electoral corruption? Does anybody believe that if he had just conceded defeat the way that every other president in American history has done, that any of this would have happened? And of course it would not have. It all spun out of his pathological determination to stay in office, even though he lost the election by more than 7 million votes, 306 and 232 in the Electoral College. But there are ancillary parts of this story. We have seen the mobilizing of a domestic violent extremist movement that was empowered by Donald Trump. We've seen the way that social media was not able to respond effectively to whistleblowers from within who are saying there's going to be a bloodbath on January 6th. There's going to be violence. So these other things have come out, and it's our job to put it all together in a report to the American people before the end of the year, explaining what we found, and then to make legislative recommendations about how to fortify American democracy against coups and insurrections, political violence, and electoral sabotage going forward, because we've got a precious thing going here in American democracy, and we don't want to surrender it.
And one other thing the committee made very clear was that this was a plan. This was not a spontaneous rally that just happened to sprout up on January 6th, that Donald Trump knew he lost the election and intended to send a bunch of his supporters to do something about it. Member of the January 6th Select Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, thanks so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.